This episode of Key Radio Book Club will have some sensitive topics discussed. We will be discussing suicide today, so if that is potentially triggering to you, you may want to steer clear of the episode. For those of you who are still here, enjoy Key Radio Book Club.
Analyze it. Nikki! Nikki!
Good evening and welcome to Key Radio Book Club. Today we're kind of doing a double feature, kind of not, because we have two short-ish kind of routes to talk about today. But we have the Kango side story, which happens on our second run of Common, and also the Rin 1 route. So I'm joined by Uttori today, but they are not at 100% capacity, so I'm taking over main host duty for the day. And Empy is back with us today.
It's okay, because I will bring back the hype, because I am 100%. Work began. I'm in a great mood.
I could tell. It's like, it was a wild pre-show for that.
For all intents and purposes, I am actually, like, in a decent mood. Today actually went pretty well. It was just...
That's good to hear.
The wild... As many of you guys know, the wildest week, just in general. So I'm glad to be here on the Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, even though it's 8:30 right now, because I was late. My bad.
Yeah, that's okay. We're happy you're here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. We're here to talk about some of the fun times that are not quite the best preludes of all time.
We're here to talk about Best Girl.
In some ways, yeah, I don't entirely disagree. So what order do we want to go in?
Here's the thing about two little busters for me. You say anyone's best girl, you're right. I don't care.
I'll be like,
I don't care
yeah.
which one. You're all right.
You're
right.
I'm with you there.
So I think since this episode is technically labeled as Rin 1, but we are talking about Kengo, I think we should do Kengo first, just because he appears first.
Yeah,
it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And also, I just feel Rin is gonna be the shorter part of this episode. Like, just in general, because for those who don't know, Rin's route is split into not even two. It's really just like you get the first like couple thousand lines of Rin route, and then the rest of it's later. They're like, no, you don't get the whole route. Goodbye.
I'll
get to
definitely
that.
talk about that. Yeah.
We have a lot to talk about, because that's like the thing is, like, even though it is the miniature route of the story, it's very important.
Oh, it's so
Right.
very important as a setup.
All right, so starting with Kengo, though, like, this is, like, one of the interesting things about Little Busters as a whole that you really start to realize on your second playthrough of a full route. If you did Rin 1 first, you actually won't get this Kengo sequence until your third playthrough. You have to have completed one full route, so that's not including Rin 1. But if you're going in book club order, you will have completed Komari route first, so when you're going for Rin 1 second, you will get the Kengo story. So the first thing we notice is that, like, during a random baseball practice, Riki will hit the ball off into some random direction, and we see Kengo talking to a girl there. The girl is Miyuki Koshiki, and she is, in my opinion, one of the most, like, deceptively deep side characters in this game.
Doesn't even have a sprite, which is a crying shame, because her design is amazing.
And that's the other...
It's so weird, because, like, she does have a design, like, she just doesn't have a sprite, and yet, like, even in EX, whenever Achan Senpai, of all people, got a sprite, she didn't, and I'm just like, but for why?
And the other thing is that Miyuki was voiced in the original game. Like,
Yeah.
very few side characters in the original game were voiced, and like, in terms of like spriteless characters who were voiced, it was only her and Achan. So, why Miyuki didn't get a sprite, I don't know. It's definitely a shame, probably because she has less screen time overall, because the entirety of her screen time outside of one thing that happens in Rin 2 is during this sequence.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
Platy in chat says truly the Inoue of Little Busters, and honestly, that's a fair assessment, I think. Like,
Deserved a
Yeah,
route, but
I
never got
agree.
one.
it deserved a route, never got one, yes. And like, the thing is with a route for her, like, it's not like directly stated, but it's heavily implied that she is romantically involved with Kengo. So like, a route with her and Riki would not.
It's pretty explicit.
You read the Japanese, you can say that more accurately than I can.
Yeah, no, they definitely are romantically involved. Like, I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about it. No, if there was going to be a route, I mean, here's the thing with Little Busters: it's not necessarily 100% a romance novel.
And that's
Yeah.
fair. Also, I'm of the mind that we need more bro characters that get their own heroines. I don't mind if the root is not the girl gets with the main character. Hey, the girl can be with the bro character too. We just need more of that, please. I'm begging
Ryoichi and
you.
Miki from
Yeah.
Summer Pockets.
Yeah.
Yeah, more of that stuff. Like I get some people don't like it, but I don't. I want more stuff like this. People have lives.
Yeah, and I think like for Kengo as a character, it's totally realistic because like he is in a sense like the most like down to earth of the three boys. Like Masato, I don't think is like I love him,
Down
but
to
he's
earth
not
for now.
he's not dateable. And then Kyosuke, same thing. Like I love them both, but they're not boyfriend
crazy.
material.
They're crazy.
Kengo's boyfriend material. Like
I don't know. I personally, I would love them all. That's just me. I love the Little Busters so much.
He's
Fair.
he's a very level-headed individual.
Yes, that's really like what it comes down to here. I think.
He's very quick on his feet, you could say.
Yeah. Now, to talk about Miyuki a little bit, her she had some kind of accident, and because of that, her big passion, which is archery, was completely ripped away from her. And like, it's something that she and Kengo used to have in common, since he has this like big passion for kendo and he can still do it, but Miyuki can't anymore, and it's really sent her spiraling into a very deep depression that Riki is not seeing right away. He's so focused on the Little Busters that like he's only seeing little bits from the outside. And I love this because it shows in this game's common route that the other characters have their own lives outside of the main friend group.
It's a bigger world and bigger cast. Like this whole thing, it's a working world. Like the Little Busters
exactly.
are one part of it, but like they said, they're seen by other people as the big troublemakers of like the infamous troublemakers. So yeah, not everyone in the little like the Little Busters don't make up the main and singular like cast in the entire world. This is a working world. There are other characters. There are like Sasami is a recurring character, but she has her own things going in the background. She has connections to Little Busters that we aren't always privy to. And that's
right,
just
and
one
like
of those
other
cool
little
things.
things like Kanata, when she appears, she'll just be like, "Hey, you're bothering people," and you realize, oh, yeah, we're kind of annoying, and it's
We're
pretty
kind of
great.
being wild.
Yeah, but like you get so sucked up in their shenanigans that you don't really think about how like normal people probably react to it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
mean, like, you gotta think, like, these are the type of people that if you ever went to, like, a public high school, they're the one friend group that everyone knew about, that hung out all the time together, inseparable, probably were really annoying to anyone who wasn't in the friend group, but, like, in that friend group, like, they'll cherish those memories for the rest of their lives. And realistically, what's hilarious about that is everyone had that. If you went to a public high school, you were part of, like, a friend group like that everyone knew about. It's why cliques exist. Like, it's literally just the Little Busters is the most, like, nonsensical, like, crazy from all ends of the Misfits spectrum put together.
Exactly.
That they exist.
Why we love them. But yeah,
And
there
it's
are other
like-
people in this world.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, like, Kengo specifically doesn't want to get involved. Like, in your first run through, he won't join the baseball practice at all. He's only part of the battle rankings. But on your second run, that does change because of what we learn about his life and how he can change things. So, like, do we want to just get right into the end of this sequence? Because really there's just, like, there are a few little sections where Riki runs into them, and then, oh no, there's one more I have to talk about because I have to take back my complaint from last week. I bitched a lot 2 weeks ago on the common route about the Rin infiltration sequences. I think they are repetitive, kind of annoying, and just generally pretty boring. The one new one we get for this Kengo story completely invalidates all of my complaints, because Rin runs into Koshiki there and we see Kengo actually react. Like, he's just there and vibing and, like, just like grumbling about it, but he secretly enjoys it for most of them. And all of that is to set up this one where he actually gets involved, and there's a specific line from him that just, like, made my heart sink. He said, "Keep her talking."
Oh, that hit way too close.
As soon as he said that, I'm like, he thinks she's gonna kill herself. And it's
so I'm no expert on the topic, but I do have my fair share of experience with said thing. It is a very accurate line, all things considered.
I agree. Yep.
It's one of those things where anyone who's seen the signs or know the signs is like, yeah, just keep them talking. Sometimes that's all you need to keep them going one more night. I'll say Little Busters handles it fairly well. This is a very difficult topic to cover.
Very difficult.
In general. But I think of any of the characters to deal with it, Kengo was definitely the best choice for a few reasons. One of them just being the fact that I don't think any of the other Little Busters would have been strong enough to handle the weight of what was going on.
I don't think any of the others are mature enough.
Yeah.
But Kengo, he saw, and this is probably honestly the reason why he didn't join the baseball team initially, is in this person he saw someone who you look at and she got her dreams taken away. So, and he gets to live out his dreams with not just the Little Busters, like he secretly enjoys that, but also the Kendo Club. And there's kind of like a guilt. So it's almost like he shuts himself off from one side, almost like in solidarity and trying to support. What Kendo doesn't realize is sometimes that honestly makes them feel worse because they know what they're doing. And then they feel responsible. But no, I do love this sequence, and Rin. I actually like skipped ahead in like the translation files recently to look at it, just because like this is gonna be a hot minute before I get to these, but I want to read through them, and it just kind of hit me like, man, they put these all together and they're kind of silly, and then there's one just randomly where you run into her, and it's like just hidden in the same day, like right next to the normal one where Rin is not running into her, and it's just. It is a stark difference. Like, it's a very different scene. And Little Busters managed to handle it with a great sense of nuance. Despite the fact that realistically, in terms of line count, it's only like 200 lines of the story. It's not a lot. It is.
It doesn't
a
feel
blip
that small, but yeah.
in the grand radar of Little Busters, but yet it is honestly one of the most memorable things about Common Route. I mean, they thought it was big enough, like a big enough moment that they put specifically the attempt in the OP as a CG.
Right.
Mhm,
Well,
yeah.
the other piece to it not being that long, like in this sequence when Rin runs into her in the dorm, like how many of you paused on that line from Kango? Because I certainly did. I saw him react, and I'm like, that's weird. And then he goes, "Keep her talking," and I just sat there for a minute, and I'm like,
It hit way
wow,
too hard.
okay. It's
hit
like
way
it's
too
very
different.
sudden, but
I
it's
had to
good because that's how it happens.
I kind of had to skim through it for personal reasons, but I did also kind of take pause.
Yeah.
I mean, those who have never heard like my own story, that'll probably be a Hisako episode if we ever get Angel Beats First Beat Book Club. Who knows? Maybe one of these days. But it's one of those things where it's important like to have someone who knows you like that in this situation, and Kengo was that person. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, like, we're talking about fiction, but real life, please remember there are hotlines to call. Like, they do exist literally to do the exact same thing, just to keep you talking. So if you're struggling, please reach out to people and people you love, because they do love you. They do.
Yeah. There are answers. Like,
Yeah.
and to your point before about the others not being able to handle it as well as Kango, like you could see Rin completely innocently says the exact wrong thing there, cuz like Miyuki is talking about how like Kengo also said he likes books, so even if he couldn't play kendo, he could find another passion. And it's the thing where like Rin's like, that isn't true at all. I've never seen him read ever, which is completely against what Kengo was trying to do, but it also speaks a lot to Rin's character and her weakness, and I don't say that as a knock on Rin at all. If anything, I think it's a character strength for her.
She's a very strong-willed and honest character,
right? Which will come to
straight.
Play later.
She is that is something that is very like subtle about Little Busters, that these characters are generally very, very honest with themselves, and when they hide things from each other, it's usually in very complicated ways that you might not expect. And Rin is probably the simplest of the main Little Busters, like even more than Masto, because she literally says on her mind. Exactly.
Honest to a fault. And like,
that's
you know,
intentional. It's part of her who she is.
Her flaws making her interesting. Go ahead, Uti. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. And I think another thing that makes the representation of this specific relationship dynamic between Kengo and her accurate and well done in a sense is we don't get the whole sob story. Like, not to call it a sob story, right? But we get bits and pieces through kind of deciphering, but we don't know this person. Like Riki doesn't know this person, and that's just a very accurate depiction. This is between Kengo and her, and you're getting a glimpse, a window, and that's why I think also it being a relatively short part of the game is important, because Riki is not the hero. Riki's not the hero in this case. He's not. He's not. Yeah. He's not the main character of this story. We get a glimpse of someone else's story, and it makes you realize, like, these characters could go through things outside of the main plot silently without you ever realizing, because Riki is not an unreliable narrator, but he is not an omniscient narrator. He only knows what he knows. So it's not like he's an omniscient narrator. He's very much a limited point of view, not an unreliable point of view, but a limited one. So,
which is very very important in this scenario. It's what adds the fact that Little Busters is a working world, and there's so much depth to all of this, even
Exactly.
outside the
Like
lives of the group.
I said on the Common Route episode that Riki like thinks he's a side character in Little Busters, but in this story he actually is a side character. His job is to be support for Kengo, which is really important in how you get the ending to this sequence because you have to press him on. You have to encourage Kengo to go up to the rooftop. And I love that. It's the one little bit of influence Riki has on this story, but it's exactly what Kengo needs in this situation and kind of strengthens the relationship between Riki and Kengo for me.
I agree. And I'll say I think it's a smart decision to leave it as a second Common Route thing for one reason. Little Busters is a story about getting stronger, and even one quote unquote loop ago, one route ago, Riki would not be emotionally strong enough to be able to push Kengo on. He wouldn't wouldn't know to do better.
Yeah, but I argue neither was Kengo. Kengo needed that push. And I'm going to call back to something in Komari Route. And there's a layer to this in Refrain, too, that I won't talk about. But in Komari Route, there's a scene where Riki is in the cemetery and he sees Kengo there.
I wanted to mention it. I didn't want to know where to mention it.
Yeah, and it's a kind of thing where, you don't necessarily know what it means, but you could posit from it that Koshiki jumped off that roof in the previous route.
Yeah,
it's very sad when you think about it that way.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's just one of those little hints that makes you question a few things.
Yeah,
but it's interesting that there's this sort of very subtle reference that most people wouldn't catch, but it shows that this was there, and it's a very slight implication that just makes this new playthrough all the more rewarding when you realize it. Because this is another reason why we had the Komari route first, is because that scene is completely missable. And
I think
it's such a shocking
it's also
scene
important
when you think about
to
it
do.
harder.
I used to be a firm Rin route first type person because Rin 1 is a very good introduction route to the mystery of Little Busters. But then, for those who don't know, once you finish this kind of half route, it's not even really a full route. It's not even half of a route. It's a third of a route, if that. It's such a minuscule part of Rin route. But Rin does start kind of changing after this in Common Route. Not much of a spoiler.
Yeah.
Most people know this. But admittedly, it does fit her character more to have that scene where she's saying all the wrong things at the wrong time. Before you head into her route. It is a very fitting thing. Which we'll talk about Rin more in a second. Let's go ahead and talk about the climax of this story, which is obviously
the rooftop and the scene after.
The rooftop and the aftermath. Who wants to go first?
This was rough to read. I'm just gonna be straight.
It is.
It's really rough to read. Little Busters is generally a very cheerful work, I feel like. And then we've experienced this in the Komari route, but when this visual novel wants to get real, it doesn't hold back. It is way too close to some really heavy subjects, and this is probably one of the earliest examples of it, because jeez.
It's a very difficult read. In fact, this read through I just ended up not.
The thing that makes it most shocking to me is the fact that they put it in between the most cheerful Common Route of all time. This Common Route is so happy, and then just how the fact that we encountered Koshiki in the middle of the infiltration scene, which is in general just played for laughs for the most part, it is the biggest tone shift of all time. It is whiplash beyond words, and that's what makes these scenes work. Is that it's shocking because you never really know what's gonna happen, and it just takes you off guard because that's just kind of the case. Your lives and people's lives are all playing around differently, and you really can't know what like how people see the world. You can only see things through how you see the world, and everyone has a different story that they're going through, and some people have it a lot harder.
One thing I talked about on one of our previous episodes in way back in season 3 when we did Battle of the Works, Uti and I put Little Busters against Summer Pockets, and we both talked a lot about Little Busters' shock value, which is, and one of the biggest like first moments of this is what you just talked about, Empy.
Yeah.
I would also point out that the reason this scene also works is we've already kind of gotten the note that is like about the secret of this world, right? Which is already kind of mysterious in of itself. It's like a calling card almost to the larger
Yeah,
Little
yeah,
Busters.
Yeah.
And you have that seed in your mystery, and this scene is so jarring in the grander scheme of Common. It's a dose of reality in what feels like, honestly, a dream nostalgia trip. And it has to be intentional. It's like reality is leaking into this otherwise cheerful reality. Like there's two
Cheerful
realities.
world.
One that is
Like, everything's really
they're two different
happy.
worlds. And then it's just like all of a sudden, boom, it's like complete tone shift. And you get this a lot in Little Busters where it feels like reality strikes suddenly as if it's not supposed to be there. And I feel like it's a brilliant bit of foreshadowing as well to just how Little Busters is generally structured. Reality typically does not come in a slow foreshadow. It typically comes in very sudden bursts in Little Busters, and it's shocking. And
Since in
sometimes,
this read order we read Komari first, we were primed for this.
yep. But this is like showing you, hey, something is up, and you're not entirely sure what, because it's very like basically you got two very different Little Busters going on, and because like I've always joked, like it's like, ah yes, Little Busters, the happy work, also Little Busters, everything else.
Yeah.
And it's because it is almost two separate works in of itself, and it's an intentional thing. It's because it's almost two different worlds. And I just think it's a lovely bit of foreshadowing in early Common about like what's going on with the secret of this world.
Yeah. So, moving on to the aftermath of this rooftop scene, I don't really have anything else to add to it that you two didn't already say. But I think what makes this entire sequence so perfect for me is that we see Kengo putting into action his advice for Koshiki. Find a new passion and just like rise above, rise above your injuries. Kengo has to hit a home run one-handed. Like Masato says, you can't play baseball one-handed. You won't be able to run with a broken arm, because he broke his arm jumping off the roof to save Koshiki, and Kengo's like, then I'll just hit a home run. And I don't know, it's perfect.
Find a new way. It's very fitting, and also just like speaks to like how Kengo is as a person, is that when he is always someone that puts his everything into what he's doing, but at the same time he doesn't limit himself to just being that one thing. Like, he has a passion of kendo, and he is really good, and he puts his everything into it. But like he teaches Koshiki, just because you lose one thing doesn't mean you can't find something else. And boy does he become one heck of a batter.
I'd also like to point out that, like, symbolically, it's the yin and yang to the earlier discussion with Rin, where, she's like, oh, well, he said, like, hey, even though I love Kengo, I also like books, so I could read books. And Rin's like, that's not Kengo, though. He I've never seen him read a book in his life. And Rin missed the point of the analogy. And then Kengo literally is fulfilling that same thing, the yin and yang. He got she sees something being taken away from Kengo, which is his ability to do kendo, which, by the way, crazy guilt that she's probably feeling from that. Like that she's kind of like not responsible, but like she'll feel responsible in a way for that. But like seeing him almost instantly rise above and find something else to do is a very inspiring story.
Very heartwarming and very inspiring. He got over the barrier.
If
I knew it was coming. I knew you were gonna say it. But it's true. He did. Like.
And this links back to the larger point I've been talking about with Little Busters as well. Little Busters is a story about mental illness and rising above it. And Kendo is a wonderful example of this because he's a perfectionist through and through. I feel that's probably that's probably what he represents as perfectionism to a T. And you just see it in everything he does. And losing the ability to use that arm. All of a sudden, that picturesque, perfect Kendo realized, what's the point in perfectionism? Like, be a little messy, be a little crazy, say the weird thing, right? And I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. Yeah. Kendo has like the best mini arc before he gets like his own actual proper arc of all the Little Busters. It's wonderful and fantastic. And also, once again, Little Busters being a work about mental illness and rising above it. It managed to touch one of the most touchy subjects in a very respectful manner, and that's honestly,
I think it was tasteful.
It was very tasteful.
They did it very well, yeah. Like
Maida has discussed suicide 3 times in his works, and each time it has been tasteful. He has a no miss record when it comes to this, and honestly, I have a ton of respect for it. Just because like it takes a lot to actually like properly write it. It's very difficult to handle.
Obligatory read Nekogari.
Obligatory read Nekogari and obligatory read First Beat.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean I enjoy it, and like it brings out the fact that like, unbeknownst to Riki, who has his own problems that he's aware of, as I've previously mentioned, Riki's mental ailment is depression, and in turn almost like not apathy but like complacency. He doesn't want things to change. He's scared of the unknown. He gets to see, but like we get a glimpse that like the stark reminder to Riki that Kengo, someone he looks up to, someone that for him he kind of idolized as this person who was part of the group that pulled him out of this deep dark hole of despair he was in so long ago, is also going through something, is also having to deal with his own problems, right? And I think that's a very like interesting stark reminder, because if Kengo, this, you know, for lack of a better term, he is the perfect child of the group. He isn't a troublemaker. He's stoic, well-spoken. He's not reliable. Like Masato, where he's kind of dumb. He's reliable. But like the fact that he's going through things, what if Masato's going through something? What if Kyosuke is going through something? It really opened the door to the larger discussion of like, is anyone in the group okay? Spoiler alert.
No.
Everyone has their own story to tell. We'll get to them in time.
Little Busters is a psychology story about mental disorders, mental illnesses, and how to overcome them in a healthy mechanism and manner. And honestly, this short story is impressive because it is like a perfect example that you do not need 5,000 lines to write an effective arc.
No, you don't, and it says to the quality of this story that we've all been able to talk so much about it at length, because it is very important and very well done. Like, this is very tasteful and honestly very inspiring, I feel like, to the people that would need something of this, because unfortunately suicide is a very real thing that a lot of people have like consider and fall to. And I feel like, especially when Maeda talks about it, as someone who goes through a lot of social turmoil or mental turmoil, it makes it all the more inspiring when he is able to share these kinds of stories, because he he almost makes these stories for himself, but also to everyone around him, and that's what makes them hit so strong. He knows better than anyone like these feelings and these difficulties that people face, and that's also what gives these stories the strength that help others stand up, like Kengo did.
I also think like it's an important thing that Maida's doing in the sense because I mean, even if like he wasn't going through things, I felt like he was also kind of doing this story for others because I don't know if you know the statistic. It's like 18 suicides per 100,000 people in Japan, which is I don't know if you know like suicide rates. That's very high. That's an incredibly high amount.
I mean, it's
a very concerning amount. So bringing up a story surrounding the topic is not only something that like he was probably doing to help himself because he's been very honest and open about his own mental health struggles, but it's also very much the case where it's like it was probably also because I mean, I don't even want to say probably. He said this in his Nekogari interview. He wants his stories to reach someone wherever they are, where they're sitting and reading it, and help them get through something. That's all he's ever wanted to do is that his stories would reach people. And I think this was an important topic to talk about.
Yeah.
He has reached, and the fact that he has so many fans now is a testament to that. He has been able to share some very powerful stories, and this is one of them, without any question.
Did either of you give this story a separate rating? Because I did.
I give it. So I lump it in as part of episode Kengo, in the sense that I consider it part of Kengo's larger narrative, and since Kengo does get more content, I just lump it into his whole segment that he gets later on in the game.
Understandable.
Just because it is kind of the foreshadowing, because this isn't like much of a spoiler, but it does get brought up again with Kengo. It is a reoccurring theme. And this is actually the part of the time. So I'm actually going to recount my first read through of Little Busters as a VN. And also an anime, specifically with a line where Kyosuke at the beginning of the game goes, "Kengo will understand soon enough." This is when I started getting really sus of that line, because all of a sudden Kengo understood through the worst of circumstances. I was like, how did Kyosuke know? Right?
Well, Riki's comments on this too. Yeah.
Riki comments on it, and the music shifts so drastically.
I don't want to get deep into this track yet because I'm going to talk a lot about it at the end of the episode.
It's intentional placement. That's all I can say.
I will say this is something that the Japanese foreshadows infinitely better, only because I'm going to bring up a line from the very beginning of the game. And I think it helps with the mystery of Little Busters. It's played off as a nonchalant thing, but remember how at the beginning of the game, it talks like, they're talking about like, oh, Kengo and Masato don't fight when Kyosuke's not around, so he could be the mediator. And then Riki makes an offhand comment going, maybe Kyosuke can tell the future, because honestly, it seems like he knows everything we're going to do, or maybe he's just like that compassionate of a guy. And that one line is like a multi-layered thing that gets better every time you read, as like Kyosuke makes offhand comments and Riki points it out and is like, hey, that's weird. How'd you know?
Very weird. It's very odd.
People who get shocked that Kyosuke is part of the larger narrative of Little Busters, I'm always like, you are missing the crumbs. It is a breadcrumb trail leading directly to the Natsume brother. Like, it is a wild thing. Obviously, we can't talk about specifically what he's doing, but it is clear that there's more than meets the eye with Kyosuke Natsume. And I think like this story is evident of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of very clever hints, and I don't know if this would be a good segue, but I'm just gonna continue on what Lucy said about ranking the people. This thing. I'm gonna be real with you guys. As I read through this Little Busters for my second read, is my fourth read consumption. I'm beginning to think I'm just gonna give everything here a 10. I don't think I have any problem with this actually. I think this is the best story of all time. I don't know, man.
Well, I
Um,
gave this
Pick.
sequence a 10. Like, I would
I-
not change a thing about it. I would not make it longer. I would not give Riki a bigger role. I would not change anything about the story itself. I think the way it was presented, I think the placement it's presented, after you've already done a full route and already know what Little Busters is like, I think everything about it is exactly it's perfect. It's perfect.
I agree. It's a very good sequence. I'll lump it in with my larger rating of Kengo's overall story as well.
Yeah,
I give
so-
Kengo as like an arc, just in general throughout all of Little Busters, a 10.
So we'll hear more about that on the refrain episode.
But
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
can't wait for
10
that.
with the asterisk of you'll hear more about it later.
Yeah. All right. Again,
Rin
I'll
time.
read Gown's comment though. Like I said, I wouldn't change anything about it, but Gown is right. A sprite from Miyuki would have been nice, but that's okay.
I agree
was
with
honestly-
that.
So
I'm not docking a point for it though.
I'm
I'm
not
not
docking
docking
a
a point
point.
either.
I will say, given the fact that it was a very intentional decision to add A-chan senpai, I am willing to think it might be an intentional decision to
Not
Not-
add Miyuki.
Miyuki, because Tariki, she's not major or like someone that he knows personally. In fact, one of the only times we see the design is a short moment from Kengo's point of view. And that's because to Kengo, that's what he sees. But Tariki, she's just a passerby. She's no better than like any of the side characters that
Yeah,
exist.
it's a complete like fair justification for it. So
Yep.
all right. Anyway, on to Rin. The
Rin's great. I love her. She's my favorite.
She's awesome.
first thing we got to talk about is actually in common, because we do have a significant amount of common route stuff that if you followed the Komari choices last time, you shouldn't have gotten any of these actually. But we have one of her cats, Lennon, bringing her notes about random tasks to do, with the promise that whoever's sending her the tasks will tell her and Riki, quote, the secret of the world.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a really silly setup, but here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize about these tasks on their first read, which is the commonality between all of them. They seem completely random, but they all involve helping others.
They do.
Yep.
That's
I love this fact so much because like
it's a
they
really good detail.
easily could have made it about just playing random pranks, because like these are the Little Busters. We would be along for the ride for that anyway. Like we'd be along for the ride no matter what kind of silliness these people were making them do. But no, it's all specifically helping people. You know, like the caterpillars in the tree are, you know, like getting all over everybody. They don't want that, so deal with them. My favorite one in particular is the lunch mini game. All of the lunch ladies all get food poisoning at the same time. Wild that happened. So let's serve
Wild
lunch.
that happened.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but yeah. And I also do appreciate this detail because it also puts you on the spot of like, what will these characters do and how can they overcome it? Because it is just Riki and Rin. Like, while they do get support from the rest, it's up to Riki and Rin to decide to do these things and how to handle them. They basically take them all on their own. Like, these are things that they have to face, and while the others do support them, especially like in stuff like the cooking mini game, which is, I love the fact that they made that a whole mini game. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Amazing feature. But like, it is something that these two face together alone, which is interesting because they're also the quote unquote weakest of the main five. They're the people that can't stand alone as much. Riki is always relying on Kyosuke and like the others for help, and Rin is extremely shy and awkward with people.
And standoffish. Rin, like, I think this is important to point out with Rin before we even talk about this. The fact that Rin specifically needs to help people is important to her own development as a character, because she is a
yes.
you know what? I'm just going to talk about it. Analyzing Rin Natsume in the beginning of Little Busters, because she's great, but you need to kind of like look at her on the macro scale. Rin Natsume is a very standoffish person. She is also a very selfish person.
Yes.
The first scene is actually one that I recently translated, which is the first scene you can actually make a choice to watch her. She's on day duty, on day 2 of Little Busters. She's supposed to be cleaning the whiteboard in the classroom. And the girls are upset because they can't find her, and they know that she's probably just doing whatever she wants. So Riki goes to find her, and of course she's playing with her cats. On your first playthrough of Common, you cannot convince her to clean the whiteboard at all.
Yep.
Not in the slightest. In fact, the line you get is, well, I ended up cleaning the whiteboard by myself, from Riki. And this is very indicative of Rin's current state. She is unintentionally or not very incidentally self-absorbed. Not in like a mean sense or one where it's like that, but she's very standoffish, and she's not a very helpful person. She loves her cats. She loves playing with them, but then other than that, like, and she gets like some moniker of joy hanging out with the Little Busters, but she'll never admit that to your face. And she's just very much like a hard to read character. And I think it's important to note that it is very indicative of what growth needed to happen for Rin specifically, with the notes being all about community service. Because I don't think Riki actually needed that. Riki was just along for the ride because Riki was there. But
Riki's much more sociable. Like he's more like
he gets along with people.
Yeah, like, he gets along with people, and then like, but Rin needed those more than Riki did, because Riki knows how to help people. Rin does not, and it shows one that there is someone, and this is like what's fun about the mystery of Little Busters. It shows that the person behind the notes is someone who knows Rin well enough to know that this is her problem, and 2, also knows Riki well enough to know that he would go along with it.
Yeah, it's very, very, very subtle writing, and I like it.
Yeah,
it's very fun, and a lot of people don't like Rin at the start of the game because of her attitude. I mean, I get it. It's not like...
I was one of those people on my first read. I'll just say it.
I'm not going to say she is the most likable person. It's very hard to necessarily enjoy someone who... Because the main character's just like, hey, you know, I'll help you with the whiteboard. Just because she doesn't want to, she says, drop dead, damn it. Like...
Yeah. Something to mention is that she's a very stark difference and clear difference in comparison to previous key main heroines. Because all previous key main heroines, they're a lot more like Komari in that they're very innocent, and they're very cheerful, and they're very positive. They're a bit clumsy, but they're trying their best, and they're very earnest. And Rin, while she is also very earnest, she has different flaws to her and different character traits that makes her stand out a lot. And that's what really stood out to me when I first consumed Little Busters, because I was like, oh, Rin is very, very much a different character to a character like Nagisa or Misuzu. She has her own type of deal and her own personality that's very distinct.
It's a very unique situation for a cover girl, and it was almost as if she was not meant to necessarily be the cover girl initially, like, because like if you look at like Komari, she is the
Komari
to the T
feels
standard.
Identical to like those tropes. Yeah,
she is like the standard one, and I honestly, if you look at the route files and the way they're codexed, like inside, Rin is heroine number 2. Like she is coded as heroine 2.
She's 2 in the opening too. She appears
Yeah,
second.
Yes.
I do think that while it wasn't a late game decision to make her the cover girl, I do think that she was originally not supposed to be the main heroine, like, in a sense. She was gonna be important.
Andre in chat says yes because Kyosuke is heroine number 1.
I agree.
Yeah, in the files, I will actually read off the file names because I do happen to have an itemized list for no particular reason, obviously. Let's go through it because it's actually an interesting thing to read. So Kamari is listed under the scene files 1000, which means that her heroine codex call is number 1. Rin is listed under number 2, or the 2000 scenes, alongside refrain, which is 26. So technically, you can count refrain as almost like Rin plus. If you call it like her codex, it's almost like a Rin 2.5 almost. And then Haruka is heroine 3. Her codex number is 3. Kud is 4, Kurigaya is 5, and Mio is 6. Which incidentally,
that's our route order.
That is the route order. So the reason I bring it up is I think that is probably the intended read order as well, and also probably the heroines in order of importance from top to bottom. Because Mio being 6 kind of makes sense. She is the most out there heroine of all of the Little Busters.
Yeah.
But I mean that's not a bad thing.
That is a very funny coincidence, though, I will say that.
Yeah.
But Rin being heroine number 2 makes me think that she was definitely not intended at the start to be the main heroine, but might have found a story that he could tell. And much like any other work that Maida writes, the moment he finds a story he can tell, he'll change the entire development of the game to make sure it happens. And Rin is that.
Honestly, I have no qualm with it.
Yeah, Rin is that story because it also means that she sticks out from the group. Because she is not like Nagisa, who is like this like kind of picture perfect heroine, or Misuzu, or even Ayu, where like their personalities are loud or like sweet or kind. Like they're all inherently kind. Rin is not like on paper an inherently kind person at the start of the game. I mean, she literally tells Riki to drop dead at one point. Like she's not even a tsundere. She is just Sun. Like she can just be mean, and sometimes without even realizing that she's being mean. In fact, like, it's brought up in day 2 in, like, the scene directly following it when they're having, I think it's dinner, and Rin is like, y'all are idiots, and Kyosuke goes, all right, maybe not all of us are idiots, and he, like, kind of has to, like, simmer her down a little bit, and he's, like, the only one that knows how to do it, because, you know, they're siblings, but it's an interesting thing, and I think it should go without saying that if we're going to be talking about mental disorders and mental illnesses and stuff within Little Busters, we need to talk about what I think Rin represents. And I think it is high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. Basically, where she is able to obviously communicate well, like not well in the sense that like she is good at it, but she can say words. She might not necessarily be good at fitting in socially.
It's the social deficit part of autism that like really affects her the most.
If you want to get specific with a very outdated term that you might have heard before, most people a few years ago might have called it Asperger's. Like that would probably be the flavor that we're talking about here.
Which hasn't been an official thing in the last decade or more, but...
But it is a term that most people have heard. So might as well like bring it up so that people might know like what to compare it to. But I think it's an important representation. You know, there's always a joke of like which key. I was talking about this with Platty earlier. Actually, I was getting very frustrated because like there's a lot of like jokes about like is Misuzu from Air autistic or is Nagisa autistic, and I'm like no, or like Kotomi, and I'm like no, they're not. Like this feels very disingenuous that the only time that you bring up is someone autistic is when they're inherently like dumb. Or like they act airheaded, like as if that's like the only defining character trait of someone who's on the spectrum.
Yeah,
And
no, it's called a spectrum for a reason.
and like Rin is one that I'm like able to say like no, like I can point to her and point out reasons why, even though no one would put her on the spectrum if they don't know any better. Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like I'm qualified to speak to it because I myself am autistic. I think I should bring that up before we continue talking about this. But I see a lot of myself in Rin. She
I
has
also
trouble
do.
masking,
Yeah.
where she just kind of says what's on her mind. She, like I said, honest to a fault. Sometimes because she does not realize she's being mean. She's just thinking that she is helping you by being honest.
Yeah,
and
this is kind of
she
where I
could
wanted
not
to
be
go
more
with it
clueless.
when you're finished. This is kind of where I wanted to segue into something.
And
I
she's
agree.
not even, I don't think, directly aware that she is being selfish. She is just focused on her cats or like the things around her, and she just focuses on the things that make her happy because that's just kind of how the brain works. But
This is
the
really
lesson
where I
that
want to
she
go.
the lesson that she had to learn is sometimes you can be happy by helping other people, and that's also important.
I want to
Yeah.
specifically talk about the Aikawa scene because, like, the thing that you're saying here about Rin being focused on what she wants to focus on, the perseverating aspect of her, which is also indicative of autism spectrum disorder, she'll like once she gets on a topic, she'll be on it, you know, and
Yeah,
like
hyper
this
focus.
is where you really see the inherent kindness she does have, because like when Aikawa is in love with Sasami of all people, she really goes all out on helping him, including coming up with a plan to make him fight Kango. Like,
Yeah,
who
despite
comes
the
up
fact
with
that she hates
this?
Sasami.
Exactly. Like, that's the other piece. I don't think she really hates Sasami. I think she just finds her annoying, which, like, same. At least at this point in the game. But
There's one specific phrase that I think it needs to be brought up, and it's a Japanese phrase, but it's something I kind of understand. Whenever Riki was trying to like get her to do the whiteboard before like any development and stuff, she says, "You're noisy. Shut up." That phrase like really stuck out to me because like "you're noisy" is like something that like I would say whenever I'm just getting like overwhelmed by noise. It's just like, hey, you're just noise. Like, please be quiet. I can't process what you're saying right now because you're noisy. Urursai. And I think it's like an important thing because another thing that Rin also does is she masks a lot, or what we call mirroring, which is where she's in a situation, people are doing one thing, so she kind of just goes along with it because she thinks that's a normal thing to do. Unfortunately, she's with the Little Busters, which do not do normal things. So
Yep.
her example is
also
bad.
why we love her. Her example is bad, but at the same time, she has fun with it. So
Yeah.
she is a buster in every way. She just has her own quirks, and to be fair,
Shaka
don't we
shaka
all?
hey.
Don't we all?
But like, I think it's important because like, you have to be careful when talking specifically about autism. I mean, it's another sensitive topic because you know, it's still like a fairly recent research field, like in the grand scheme of psychology.
It's very real
in the sense
too.
that like, we don't know like everything about it yet. We don't know how it can affect people. Like, there's new things being put on the grander spectrum. I mean, it's the joke that like it's probably been around for a while. I mean, why else would people be so obsessed with trains? Like it was just like a thing back then, and like it was kind of a joke, but it was real. Like, boys would just hyperfixate on like specific things, and they would become like geniuses in their class, and like just for no reason, like just randomly, like they were not special in any other regard other than this one topic. And Ren's kind of the same. Once she's on something, she becomes like an expert about it for no reason, and like it's maybe not the most well-informed expert, but that's okay.
She is the ultimate cat person. Like, she knows a lot.
Even though
noting,
sometimes she says wrong things about cats, which is
also
kind of
true,
hilarious.
But to be fair, everyone has their mistakes, but like she also has a clear fixation on cats, and there are plenty of moments in the story where people come to her for help when it comes to cats because she knows the most.
Worth
She
noting,
does
she
indeed
is
know
the
the
one
most.
who rallies everyone together for the lunch mini game. You know, like side note, I love how that was handled in the anime. Like,
Yes.
I
they
agree.
kind of expanded on it in the anime, so definitely
God,
recommend
yes,
that as well.
having the full cast there was so nice.
Yeah.
It's it's also like the reason like it's important to bring this up is because Rin is going to be a character we revisit a lot because as we said, her route is a half route, but I think the lesson that she learns as well is that self-isolation gained her nothing because as we see throughout her route, even though she is an antisocial person, more not because she wants to be antisocial. This is evident in even her opening scene where Riki's like, "Do you even have any friends?" And she gets like kind of embarrassed, like she's very
But
much
also
like
a little defensive.
she's like, why does it matter if I don't have friends? Not like, oh, I don't want friends. She's just like, I like she gets really awkward because she feels pressured and she doesn't know how to make friends and to talk to people. So she kind of just grills into Riki like, hey, what does it matter? Why would it kill you if I don't have friends? Like, just shut up, you know? And that's not like a normal response that most people have to that. They'll be like, no, I'm fine. Like I don't really have anyone, or like they'll be honest. But like Rin got really defensive over it, and the reason being is because she knows deep down that she wants to make friends and she can't, and she doesn't know how. And
She's not the best at it. Yeah.
And I think like whoever put these notes here, I'm skirting around that fun little tidbit. Whoever put the notes there knew that like this would be the best way to get her to learn to make friends because in the end she had to learn to bring people together and kind of like turn her own reputation around because she was incidentally hurting her reputation around the school without realizing it.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, definitely.
So anything else about the common route stuff, or should we move on to the real Rin one, which is very short, but there's one specific thing we need to get into before anything else, which is Suginami.
Yes, let's go
Suginami,
ahead
but-
and move
yeah.
into the Rin specific stuff.
Yeah.
I love Suginami, and I think like she is she's another one like Miyuki, who I think is just an underappreciated character in this game
She
because
serves a very key purpose in that
Yes.
she has in her minority.
No pun intended.
Yeah, well that's kind of the thing, is that like she's too normal for this cast, which is why her being in love with Riki kind of sets Rin going, in the sense that like Riki realizes that like, hey, normal people want to break in but they can't, and then Rin realizes that she doesn't have a monopoly on Riki. You know, like
Yeah.
someone could steal him away if she doesn't make her move.
Rin is a fascinating case of exactly what happens whenever someone like on the spectrum realizes, oh, I like this person and I am upset that I might not be the only person that likes this person, where they get very, very defensive and protective. And specifically when it comes to romance, like this is a pretty common thing. They'll just be like, all right, I must like actually do this before crisis happens. And Rin kind of just treats it like it.
Yeah, despite when she gets him, she doesn't know what the fuck to do. She
just kind of panic runs into a relationship.
A very, very impulsive decision. And
This
like,
is one thing I do
love
want to
that
talk
so
about
much.
a bit more in detail, because I feel like this is
Let's
something
do
that's
it.
key to both Rin and Riki as a character.
Let's
All right,
do
in
it,
that case,
Empy.
I'll just talk about it.
But before you do,
I
have to mention that Suginami is voiced by Hanakawa, or Nari will get mad at me. Anyway, go ahead.
She is voiced by Hanakana, and that's amazing. Or Kanahana. Very funny names, but yeah, one thing that this whole scene makes very clear to me is that both Rin and Riki are extremely immature. And I mean that in a
Hell
in a
yeah, they
way
are.
that doesn't harm their characters, but they are both extremely immature because the way they handle this quote-unquote relationship, while it certainly works for them, it is very, very haphazard.
It is very, you could say, like, not neurotypical.
It's very much not.
They handle it in a very just not normal, like, standard relationship way. Mainly because, like, neither of them know what they're doing.
No, exactly. They don't know what they're getting into, and this is something that really stood out to me when I read Riki's thing. Is that one of the main reasons he chose to be with Rin wasn't because of Rin. He didn't want things to change. Like,
yeah,
this is
it was like
line
almost
that really stood out to me.
in a sense, Riki and Rin are two sides of the same coin, because Rin wanted Riki to basically like be like, oh well, if I'm with Riki, then Riki will never leave. And
yeah, exactly.
Riki kind of wanted Rin for the same reason. If I have Rin, then the Little Busters will never leave.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a weird
Nami
thing.
was necessary to make this happen.
Exactly.
Yes. And I think it's like a fascinating thing because at this point in their relationship, obviously their relationship grows in later parts of this story, but in Rin 1, their relationship kind of boils down to the fact that they both view each other's relationship as a mutually beneficial agreement, basically. Like,
essentially, yeah, it's just Little Busters extra. More scenes this time. Like, there is something that I do really notice in the slice of life, in that the slice of life in Rin 1 is extremely non-consequential. Nothing happens. Like, it's even more than like Komari, where it's like the things are just like wholesome. Now, the slice of life in this story, while they are cute, they are also very, very like almost empty feeling, and I can't help but feel like that's intentional.
It's almost as if Riki is just maintaining the status quo. This is the only route in which Riki does not grow, and incidentally, we know that this is the only route in which Riki does not grow because of how it ends. Rin 1 ends rather abruptly. Riki just passes out, and you get like this lovely flavor text of just like,
we don't want to get there yet, Uti. We got plenty to talk about before then. Like we gotta
fair,
talk
but
about,
it is related to the fact that like it is the status quo, and anytime Riki is like scared of growth or like facing change, it narcolepsy follows. Like, this is just a trend with his character.
Right. I want to make sure we talk about the school issue though, because like there is the whole thing.
Yes, I agree.
Like in their last task, which really is the bulk of Rin 1's plot, is the final task where they have to show the superintendent around the school, and we have some funny comedy there with Rin practicing and everything. But what it boils down to is that she and Riki did a really good job, and now Rin is being asked to participate in an exchange program to help the students of a school who lost a bunch of their classmates in a bus accident. And this entire sequence, I think, really shows Riki's weakness, because one of the big things that happens is that when the Little Busters are all talking about it, and Rin said, I would think about it, and she's talking to her friends, Riki has this one line where he says, I don't think you can handle that.
It's very
condescending. Like, it's almost condescending in a way, and like my first reaction when I saw that line was like, what right do you have to say that? You know, that's awfully possessive of you. But at the same time,
he's not necessarily wrong.
That's just Riki right now.
That is Riki, like at this point in the story.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say, or a few people say, that Riki is like a very boring protagonist, and while I can understand that from a personality standpoint, I definitely do not agree from a writing standpoint, because his writing is very much there. It's very subtle. You don't always see it, but he is very passive until he's not. And it's always when things get serious where he starts like really kicking in, and his like defensive measures sort of come up, and this is a very big example of that, is that he doesn't want things to change. He wishes the little busters and these memories can stay like this forever.
Basically,
And,
it
like-
says a lot more about Riki's weakness than Rin's weakness in that moment.
Rin was more mature.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, like I fundamentally disagree with anyone who says that Riki is a boring protagonist personality wise.
Me too.
Reason being is because if
I also
Riki is a boring
disagree with that.
protagonist personality wise, then Tomoya is as well, because they are two sides of the same depression coin. But Riki is more interesting because he actually, one, shows substantial growth across all routes that like actually carries over route to route. But also just the fact that Riki himself is he's just got a lot more nuance route to route. Like, dude, like he can be funny, but like in this scene, he is also just he's no better than like Kyosuke, who would probably say the same thing about Rin. But Kyosuke almost has more of a right because he's her brother. Like he's known her. And Riki is this phrase comes out a lot, honestly, Little Busters. Riki's in a holding pattern. In the sense that he was depressed as a kid because his parents died. Rightfully so, by the way. Like, your parents die, you get depressed. That's just kind of how it works, right? But, like, directly following that, Riki was just like, you know, the Little Busters came up, and he phrased it as if, like, they filled a hole in his heart. But it's almost like he's reliant on that hole, and he's so scared of anything that will break that status quo so much that he will instantly switch over to, like, one, being defensive, but also kind of being borderline demeaning and bringing the Little Busters down to his level because he's so horrified of them growing up. Riki's greatest flaw is his fear of change gets in the way of his actual genuine kindness, and it brings out the more nasty side that he does have, which is, I'm so scared of change, I will bring you down with me.
And so mostly a side we only see in bad ends. Like, it is
That's
very ugly.
where I wanted to go with this one, is that, like, we are, like, obviously, like, the last route we did in this book club was Komari, where we have a really terrible Riki in the bad end, and this isn't quite like that. This is more like how he is in like, Kud's bad end, for example, but it's still, you know, like, we are not seeing Riki at his best right now. And I love that specifically, considering we see how he's going to grow up from it later, which we will talk about in the Rin 2 episode. I want to point out what Arca said. It only just struck me. Rin 1 ending is straight up an extended version of the you didn't get any route ending where Riki passes out in his room. Which, by the way, we are not including that bad end in the book club itself. But at some point during the book club, I do recommend going to get it. Because it does have a pretty interesting scene between Riki and Masato, where, like, it's similar to the Rin 1 ending scene, but you get it with Masato instead. And he has some interesting lines there, so I do recommend going through the common route and just not getting on a route, and you will get this ending sequence on the 28th.
It's a very strange scene.
Yeah.
Something I really miss from a lot of older visual novels is when the bad end has some really cool implications that adds to the story if you look into it deeply enough. And I do enjoy that.
More than any other key work, I would say, has fantastic bad ends.
That and Rewrite. That's like the one thing I'll give Rewrite.
I will not give that to Rewrite. I think Rewrite bad end.
You didn't see the common route bad end was good.
The common route bad end, yeah, the bad ends in the route.
I was referring to the common route here.
Oh, I'm talking about in general. Little Busters bad ends.
I'm gonna stay out of this conversation. Anyways, so Rin is cute and lovely, and we love her, and she has the best heroine theme objectively. Ring 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 is amazing.
I like the version of Ring 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 that's on the Ontology Arrange album.
Okay, so for those who don't know, this is going to be a non sequitur unrelated to the route itself. Lucci likes the Ontology album that was bundled in with Little Busters EX. I have mixed feelings towards it. I think some tracks are good, other tracks aren't. Ring 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 just sounds like dial-up internet was given a song.
I don't actually like it. I just wanted to troll you.
I know you do, but you know what? Season 5's coming up. That track is gonna pop up somewhere, just so you can force me to listen through it. I know it will.
Fun times.
Yeah. All right.
Me at Lucci right now. Drop dead nitwit.
Pretty much.
Just the classic Rin line right there.
All right. Speaking of tracks, though, can I talk about a world where nothing happened?
Yes, please do.
I love this track.
About time.
Love this track.
Okay. This is one of, if not my favorite track in this game for a couple of different reasons. It will come up again on Rin 2 and Refrain, but I'm going to talk about it here because in this stuff we're talking about on this episode, we actually hear it twice. We hear it once when Riki is right after the Kengo sequence, when Riki is reflecting on Kyosuke somehow knowing what's going on. And then the second time we hear it is when he's falling into his narcolepsy, and then we get cut back to the title screen. Now, in both of these situations, we only hear the track for like a minute or less, like not very long, but I want to talk about my first read of Little Busters back in 2012 because I did something very interesting here in that I got the Rin 1 ending, and then I realized, that's a cool sounding track. I'm interested in it. It's really creepy, unusual for Little Busters. So I go
unusual for Key, honestly.
Yeah,
Very
for
unusual.
real. Like before or since, we haven't had much like it. I go into the extras menu and I play it and I listen for 3 minutes in, and you start getting microphone interference in it. And it's a very specific thing where when we hear the track right now in game, we don't get that far. But if you're willing to look for that secret of the world, you'll find something really strange in there. Now, Little Busters does a lot of stuff like this with sound albums. The Semi-Crystalline is basically just a sound story album that came with the original version. In Uti's intro videos, you will hear the opening to it.
Yeah, I actually love that one because the first
it's amazing.
30 seconds of Semi-Crystalline's Tanya, which is the song that capstones the beginning of Little Busters, Semi-Crystalline's album, is a culmination of a bunch of voice themes and then microphone interference that I can't even really translate. I think it's saying like sequence initialize, and then you just get Kyosuke going in Japanese, "You do not yet know the secret of this world." And
it's so good.
So good. And then from there, you get this really fun song, but at the very end, you get this absolutely creepy, disturbing cut up of every heroine's crying scream. And it is literally like one of the craziest things I've ever heard in a track. Because you realize, and then like if you loop it again, it just starts over again, and like the beginning's happy, the end is just they're crying, and you're like, what happened? It is like the biggest summary of the two sides of Little Busters. Little Busters, the reason why it works is, and why it's such a brilliant capstone to classic Key as a whole, because I do consider it a classic. It kind of ended an era of Key in a sense. It was the culmination of the better part of a decade's worth of work for the company. It managed to balance two sides of Key that had never really, like, that had always kind of fought with each other, which was its comedy and its drama. In the sense where, like, 9 times out of 10 in a Key route, prior to this, after you leave Common, which was basically almost exclusively comedy, it was just drama. Meanwhile, Little Busters like sprinkles it in throughout the routes, like where it's funny and stuff, but it's like it's almost intentionally more jarring in the sense that it is like two separate stories coexisting, as if the happy parts, Riki is aware something's wrong, and the world where nothing happened kind of calls it out. It's a nonsense track. There's like not a lot musically going on. Realistically, it's chords. Like it's a lot of chords, very creepy, much
Not even
dissonance.
that. It's
Just
single
notes.
notes. But
Yeah.
like but the interesting thing is that like the actual key, no pun intended, it's in is the exact same as Boys Don't Cry.
Yep. And
It's like the
it's a
antithesis to
disturbing-
it.
It's like a disturbing amalgamation of like memories that you blocked out, and you're aware that you blocked them out, but you can't remember them because you're so scared of opening it up. It's such a brilliant track because it shows Riki's mindset. It's the flashback to reality where it's like something's wrong, I'm about to get it, microphone interference, stop. And it's over.
Yeah.
And you're back at the title screen.
This is like, sorry, you can.
Little Busters
finish.
is a horror VN, honestly, at times.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it's kind of funny.
I made a joke to my friend Nox a few weeks ago. Like I have to find this. You talk for a minute, Uti, because I have to find this.
I want to mention, like, personally, the first time I read this visual novel and the first time I experienced it, this is like the first time in a keyword that I genuinely felt scared, because
Yeah.
this track is such a tonal difference from everything else, and because it's placed in with such like cheerful slice of life, like Little Busters has some of the most energetic, happy, just everyone's go get 'em attitude slice of life. You just get hit with this really, really foreboding and horrifying sounding track, and that thing just like stays in my mind, and whenever I read it just gives me this sinking feeling. And even now, after I've read this entire story, I know literally everything that this story has to offer. Every time that track hits, that sinking, horrifying, dark feeling in my chest always comes back without a fail, and I feel like
So good.
that is a
Shout outs to
testament how
PMMK again. Like this is
that
another
is a
one of
testament to
his.
how this track pulls it off. It's so good.
Maida is a brilliant writer when it comes to balancing both comedy and creep, in the sense, or like just drama in general. But I think Little Busters in particular was not scared to lean into not just drama, but unsettling the reader. And the reason I bring this up is because at the start of the game, it's very funny, it's very silly, but you get these small hints that there might not, there's something larger going on. One of the first ones being when Kyosuke's like passively going, he'll understand soon enough to Kengo. And you're like, okay, I mean, at first you don't blink an eye at that. That's just Kyosuke waxing poetic. But throughout the game, there's just random things that happen, random coincidences. And it's why I always kind of encourage people to do common bad end first. Riki passes out and like, and you kind of just restart, and then you go on to Komari's route, and you're kind of just chilling. And it's like, you know, standard key experience. But specifically just the shock moments that like feel like they're in a completely different world. They stick with you for a second. And then the reason why I brought it up earlier, like the crazy foreshadowing that Riki brought up, like called out the fact that it's like, what do you mean that Kyosuke would understand soon enough? And now he does. And all this happened, and then there's the music change, right?
Yeah. I just
Whenever they
realized
initially-
I can't say the thing I wanted to earlier because it has a refrain spoiler in it. So never mind.
Well, we'll bring it up in refrain.
Gosh.
But the
Yeah.
reason why that call out works is because it's one of the first times that Riki, and thus you, the reader, are synced in questioning something, which is, what is the nature of this story?
What is
because
the secret of the world?
Yeah, and like also, I always found that note kind of disturbing. Like, follow these tasks and you will discover the secret of this world. Those two things, the secret of the world, and then Riki going, huh, all these things happened after Kyosuke said, Kengo will understand soon enough, is such an interesting thing, because it's not enough for you to form any, like, long-standing theories, right? Like, nothing substantial. But it's enough that it sticks with you. And then when A World When Nothing Happens plays, it's another snapback, a callback to the moments where you just felt like something wasn't quite right. Little Busters manages to do, I'm about to throw out a big word that a lot of people use incorrectly. It uses cognitive dissonance to its advantage. Because you are able to realize as the reader, because the work respects you as a reader, that you are intelligent enough to identify one thing. Something's not quite right here. And this almost perfectly leads to like the not the climax, but just kind of the abrupt end of Rin 1. After Riki's kind of darker possessive side comes up, it just kind of ends, and it's creepy because Rin's like, "Hey, Riki," and the Rout's like, "You good?" And he's not, and it just kind of ends. And I need to get the text up. I can't even.
I have it. I have it right now. I'll read it.
Read it.
Congratulations on making it this far, but nothing has started yet. Things will not go so easily. That path which you didn't take, try to accept it next time.
Not gonna be easy.
And that moment right there is the stark, almost horrifying realization that while Riki is your POV character, you're not in control. And as a visual novel reader, for the first time in Key, it brings into question your power as the person making the choices. And I think undermining the reader's innate ability to feel power in their choices is such a brilliant thing to do so early on.
It almost makes you feel violated. Like, this is my game. What are you talking about? I can't do this.
Yeah, like, because, and it's a character that you don't know who's saying it, but they have enough influence and control to be like, yeah. And the original Japanese, this translation is
not great. I can tell.
Not great. If I was to actually fix those lines, it would be congratulations on making it this far, but you haven't really even started yet. The path which you are too scared to take it. What's that? I don't have the original Japanese. What's the last bit of that?
Oh.
What's the let me. Sorry, I'm pulling up script
that
files.
path which you didn't take, try to accept it next time is the official translation.
The phrasing is supposed to be closer to the path you were too scared to take. Try to accept it next time. Try to accept it next time is fine. But it's implying that there's someone here that knows Riki well enough, knows that he was too scared to let Rin go, and that he wasn't strong enough to do it. And he's like, and as a reader, that it's like kind of creepy because you're just like, all of a sudden, the entirety of Little Busters is Big Brother's watching, and who is he? And it's kind of horrifying, and
it's disturbing in a way that I really like.
This is the thing that like people don't bring up when they talk about Little Busters. Everyone, whenever they talk about Refrain, I won't get into specifics, talk about how Refrain empowers user choice. But no one talks about the fact that the reason why it works is because they directly took that player power away from you for the entirety of the rest of the game. The game made you feel powerless the moment you finished Rin 1.
Well, that's like an important piece. During my first read, I didn't know Rin had 2 routes. And like, that's like something that I think I would actually consider that a spoiler, though it's kind of one that's impossible to avoid for a book club since we have to tell you the pacing of the routes. But I just thought, like, at that point in my first read, I had already read Komari and Mio. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go for Rin now. Thinking that it would just be another one, not realizing that I would be forced into this extremely creepy moment. And like, that's just, it's my one gripe with Rin 1 is that just with the way things are now, like, everyone's spoiled on it.
It's just one of those things.
It's my one gripe with Little Busters becoming like a more popularly read keyword is it's kind of like the joke, like there's always like the non-spoiler spoiler in every keyword. Rin 1 and Rin 2 is kind of that, where like it's kind of a spoiler, but like everyone knows about it.
It's kind of like Kaguri existing.
Yeah, like everyone knows, unfortunately. Now, if you can ever go into Little Busters without knowing Rin 2 exists, do.
Yeah. Which, if you're listening to this episode, you don't, but that's okay.
Yeah, you don't. Like, there's always gonna be a lot of things that get spoiled as things go on time. Like, you can't keep everything blind for the first experience, and I think a lot of developers are aware of this. Like, things get out, people eventually talk about things, and it is
Right,
unfortunate, but
like
it's just how things work.
it's an inevitability, and
Yeah.
honestly, like when I mentioned this in my review, like Platty's response was basically, I knew about it, but it didn't bother me at all. And I'm like, yeah, that's
I
probably
actually
the
did
case
not.
for most people.
Because I've also mentioned this. I watched the anime first, but I didn't know about it when reading the visual novel because I experienced the story first time in a linear fashion. While I was able to experience a lot of new things when reading the visual novel, and this was one of them. It's like this twist catches you off guard when you don't realize, oh crap,
Yeah.
there's more to it. There's way more to it, and this is one of those things that we won't talk about too much again now, but it really makes you appreciate the fact that Little Busters is a visual novel only story. It was made for this medium.
For this medium, definitely something. I think we talked about that last week too.
I would also like to admit that, like, this is one of those moments in Little Busters that, while it's technically a spoiler, right? Its execution, the nature of its execution, and the specifics of how it is split up means that the end of that route's shock value will still be had, honestly. Because a lot of visual novels, like, I mean, even Clannad kind of had a soft lock on Nagisa in the sense that, like, you couldn't go past a certain point before, the route would kind of just go, like, default ending, and then Nagisa kind of got, like, an extended extra few scenes and stuff. So, like, it wasn't uncommon for visual novels to kind of lock the main heroine, like, some extra content for the main heroine that leads into, like, the true route before, you beat the rest of the heroines, right? But in Little Buster's case, the true nature of that is very much a kind of wild thing, because, like, the reader will still get shocked at, like, whoa, that soon? And also, whoa, what's this? Who's talking to me? Like, who's speaking right now?
Yeah.
It's very unnerving, and I love it.
It is almost a case where, like, the spoiler almost doesn't matter because the execution is so flawless.
Yeah,
specifically this end scene.
That was Platty's argument for me in the book club chat when I brought it up in my review, and it's a completely fair argument in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, sure, are some people gonna be, like, maybe negatively affected by the fact that it's not a surprise? Sure, but, like, it's not. It will not make or break Little Busters, especially because, honestly, Rin 2 is also a very good route in its own right, so it's not like Rin 1 being, like, kind of spoiled as, like, oh, this is, well, kind of a pointless half route, is gonna hurt the reader in any sense.
Right.
It is very much worth the experience on itself, and it adds a lot, and God, when it hits, it hits. Like, again...
Evidently, we've spoken for about an hour and a half now about Rin.
Yeah. Every scene where nothing happened in this world is ever played, it's always a good time. Like a terrifying time, but a good time.
Well, that's the thing. Like you don't get the full track in either of the two scenes we have today. Like, you only get the beginning of it, which is creepy enough. But, like, if you're brave enough to go into the extras menu and listen to it, you realize that there's more to it. Like, you will only hear it that long in the game naturally in Rin 2 and Refrain. That is it. Like, you will never hear it that long in the game naturally, which I think is just complete genius, and almost, like, you can argue that, like, going into the extras menu and hearing the whole track is spoiling, but, like, I found that bit really intriguing when I did that, because, like,
I'm listening to the track as we speak now, and I'm very scared.
Yeah,
it's unsettling, and I think the title, A World Where Nothing Happened, is a very apt description of the common route Little Busters world that we're in right now.
Yes.
Nothing of substance is happening, and yet we're complacent in it, but also able to point out that something's not quite right. And that's honestly the craziest cliffhanger Little Busters leaves you on, is the dread of the everyday. Which is a fascinating flip on the head of basically every keyword, which almost relishes in its everyday monotony, where it flips it on its head and makes it almost like a scary thing. Like, ooh, it's the same thing every time. Every time you go through it, it's the same thing, except for the small changes. But why did they change? How could they change? Like, what changed? Why is this carrying over? It's such an interesting dynamic that Little Busters has with the reader. It's almost like it's taunting you as the reader. Like,
Yeah,
it's like
so
you don't know the
good.
whole story. This is why Little Busters
It's
is a
what
masterpiece.
keeps you wanting to read. It's what keeps you wanting to read.
Yep.
Figure it out. That's what
Do we
grabs you.
have? We should probably go into route ratings then.
Yeah. Do you want to mention the survey first or us first?
Let's do our own personal stuff. I'll go
right.
first. I like Rin 1. I think it's a pretty cool route, and I like Rin Natsume. She's a cool heroine, and this route is very fun. It could get kind of spoopy, and it's a very good start to Rin's arc, and very evident that her arc has much more to it. And that made me all the more excited to read more into her. So yeah, I give this route solid 9. It's a very good starter route. A 10 out of bias because I like Rin. She's like my favorite key character. I love her, other than Ao Sorakato, but Ao is not actually my favorite key character. I just that joke has long since been held in this server and will forever be held in this server.
Yeah.
But no, 9 objectively, 10 with bias. I like this route.
All right, I'll go next. I also gave it a 9. I think I think the issues are so minuscule that, like, if you were to tell me, hey, Lucci, they're not actually issues, I'll be like, yeah, you're kind of right. But I do still think they're worth pointing out. And I also think, like, because this story is incomplete, it's a bit unfair to rate it as a complete story on its own. And weirdly enough, unlike the Kengo story, which does have a beginning, middle, and end to it. So yeah, I gave it a 9, but I still really, really like it.
It's a rock solid route.
Yeah.
A rock solid half route.
It is a rock solid half route. On my end, I mean, I said this earlier. Upon this reread, I think I just accepted. Even if there are any flaws, I'm not gonna see them and I'm not gonna care. It's 10 out of 10 for me. This is my favorite story of all time. Everything about it works perfectly for me. Like, whatever they cook, it always has the intended effect. I love it. I'm having a great time.
And I think it's important to point out that, like, Rin route individually might not be everyone's cup of tea, like Rin 1 specifically, but it is impossible to deny its importance to the larger narrative.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of divisive route, this route probably has the weirdest spread of votes we've had so far on the podcast.
It's interesting because, like, the three of us were, like, mostly really positive toward it, and then the poll came out and I'm like, oh, okay.
Everyone has unique opinions. One thing I will say is that we've also analyzed and looked at Little Busters a lot. We have broken this story a lot, so that is definitely a perspective to consider, that we know this story in and out.
Yeah.
Some people might be experiencing this for the first time. Hope you're in for the ride. Rin 1 might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's important, and when you see the whole picture, you begin to respect it so much more.
Yeah, understandable completely.
All right, I have tallied up the averages. This spread is very unique because we have 4 10s, 2 9s, 1 8, 2 7s, and 3 6s. And whenever I tally up that average, that puts Rin at a solid 8.5. So, I mean, it's Rin 1. It's not a complete route, but 8.5 is still, like, super solid given, like, each of the episode averages so far. Like, it's putting Little Busters on a track to be a solid 9, based off of, like, the community average. Because there will never be a 10 out of 10 keyword on, like, a community poll, obviously, unless, like, someone's meme voting. Everyone has unique opinions and stuff. So
Side note, we did do that for a random air cannon dojin VN once. Like, remember silliness, and we all voted it.
Right, I remember. I remember silliness.
it's kind of hilarious. And then obviously we wouldn't be Little Buster's Book Club without the power of friendship. And this week you would expect me to do Rin, but her story is not complete. So I decided I shall not do the Rin Award this week because once again, her story is not complete. So we will be doing the Kengo Award because while his story isn't complete, he did have a very solid arc this book club. The Kengo Award will go out to someone in the server that I think represents not just being incredibly reliable, but also steadfast, mature, and being willing to help people who are in need whenever they are around. And for that, it'll be our very own Platty, a very, very wonderful member of the server.
Yay,
who is always who's always kind of just the level head who comes in, especially in mod chat, where we'll be like, "Oh my god, what are we doing?" And Platty will just be like, "But what about this?" And we'll just be like,
Very supportive.
"You're right." The voice of forever the voice of reason in our chaotic group of key keepers over here, and also just a joy to have in the server.
And also
always...
Kengo abs. That's perfect for Platty. Like,
exactly. But also, like, it also manages to hit the other form of Kengo's personality, which is that very upbeat, chipper, like, positive energy vibe that Kengo also brings to the table. So the Kengo Award goes to you. Pachi, pachi, pachi.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Kiniku, yay, yay. So yeah, that is episode trace of the Little Busters Book Club. Huzzah.
Yep,
You've done
next
it.
week will be Haruchin route. We will have Spiral back on for that episode.
I won't be on it, but while I'm here, let me just say it. That one's my favorite. Look forward to it. I love this freaking route.
One day there'll be a route that like so many people enjoy. We'll need a four-person episode.
Yeah.
The refrain episode might be 4 people. I'm not gonna lie.
It might be.
Oh boy, it's already going to be long enough with the 3 of us. So
real. So real.
Yeah. All right, so that's something to look forward to. Also, I will bring up here at the end of the episode, Mume Tenrei is out. So if you're going to read that, you can get on it. Currently scheduled for... Yeah, it came out. Currently scheduled for June 12th. We will be doing a spoiler-free review of it. However, that date may change based on Uttori and Empy's work schedules. So stay tuned. I will do a Key Radio live ping when we have the official date set for that episode, but you can still mark interested in the events tab if you want to hear what we have to say about it.
Yeah, I'll need to look at my schedule because that's a weird. That's a weird week for me.
I
also need to look into my schedule. Oh boy.
I'll also bring up. I kind of joked about Refrain being like a 4-person episode. I don't think it will, just because it's already going to be long enough. But I do heavily encourage anyone as they finish Little Busters, because a lot of people aren't keeping up with like the book club week to week. They're reading ahead. When you finish Refrain, for the Refrain episode, specifically for the end, I want to read your review of Refrain and how it affected you. So please, like, send them to me. Send them to me in a DM so I can compile them, because like Refrain is amazing. Cool. So just write them up. It'll be a segment at the end if you want to talk about how much you love Little Buster's Refrain, because Refrain is all about friendship and community, and I think this is the most important episode that the community needs to be heard. So get your thoughts out early. Send me all of them. The cutout for you to be in the episode is literally before the episode. Once we start filming, that's it. But you've got months, so get going.
Yep. All right, y'all. I think that's an episode.
That's a big... This is way bigger than I thought it would be.
Yeah, but hey, that's Little Buster's Book Club.
That is Little Buster's
we're
Book Club for
cooking
you.
with this one.
It,
All right.
This is probably going to be our longest book club in terms of raw media minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not going to complain. I'm loving every second.
Me too. All right. Thank you all for being here. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Sleep well.